All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
Well, welcome back. I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is All About Relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. So today we've got a good show. I'm going to be talking about the title, which is Protecting Your Bond in a Comparison-Driven World. It's funny when I do these shows, a lot of times the ideas or the themes either come to me through people asking, maybe mailbag, but also just kind of what I feel like, what's on the news or whatever. So this one, I kind of was looking at a lot of the advertisement that were going on the television and, watching kind of movies and kind of trends and themes. But one thing I got to thinking about, especially with what we were talking about in the last few episodes, is, our own internal personal insecurities. Okay. And, one of the things I've noticed from, I've been in the field 41 years and just life. And one of the things I really notice is pretty much everybody, if not everybody, has their own hidden insecurities and worries. So, I mean, sometimes you might see people and think, boy, they've got it all together. They're really great. They're really, everything's working for them. My experience is that's not true. Even those people have insecurities. And even if they wouldn't stick around, chances are something's going to be coming up. Right. And so we're going to talk about our own internal insecurities, but what we're going to be doing is taking it to our person, taking it to the person that we love and connect with the most, and be vulnerable with them and learn ways to kind of transcend those worries and insecurities rather than fretting on them and having thought monsters about them. So, protecting your bond in a comparison driven world. Remember, one of my themes is that what I talk about has to be true 2,000 years ago and probably would be true 2,000 years from now. I like the idea of classic themes because then I don't have to worry about what's on the news, what's trendy, who's saying what about who. I don't want to show anywhere near that. I think there's plenty of them if you like them, but I don't, because my sense of it is it gets in the way of our bonds and our relationships. And it can also really help us go to that future channel and start worrying and fretting and suffering about everything that might happen in the world. I don't want to go there. I want to be more uplifting and really ground ourselves in secure love and connection. So that's what we're going to be doing. So today I put some hook questions, as I call them, or questions that are designed to get us to go, ooh, I want to learn about that. I want to hear Don's show today. So here we go. First one is, when you feel not enough inside yourself, do you recognize it? Do you recognize where it's coming from? Interesting, eh? When you feel not enough out in the world, does your partner usually see that or just see the irritation between you both? In other words, what's causing friction? Because sometimes we argue when we have friction about things, but what's going on is deep inside, we're not feeling that seen, soothed, safe, and secure inside, especially from our partner. It doesn't have to be bad, but it does feel disconnected, and we don't want that. How often do couples end up fighting with each other when the real issue is insecurity? That insecurity that's coming from somewhere else or from your past, back to what's coming up. Now, that's the time channel, right? The time travel channel. We're not in the here and now. We're in the, oh my gosh, what ifs. So we don't want to be there. We want to get back to being close and here and now with our partner. Why is it that secure couples treat comparison with other things in the world, right, as a signal to connect and bond rather than compete with their partner? Why is it secure couples know how to tie in and connect in with their partner so at the end of the day they feel less stress and more loved? We're going to talk about that today because by the end of it, I'm going to give you some really good ideas about how to make that happen. Okay. Um, do you know simple tools that can help you and your partner keep the outside pressure of the world outside and from damaging your bond, right? Because that's one of the things we need to know with our relationship, or as Gottman would say, the relationship house. How do we know what to keep in and what to keep out? For the relationship house, if you looked at it, I know I put it on before, that's the roof. You want to keep the heat and the air conditioning in, and you want to keep the problems of the world out, or the rain out, maybe for a literal translation. So yeah, just to kind of look at that, we really want to pay attention to that bond. And today we're going to be talking about outside influences in the world. Okay. So again, this is all about relationships. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Remember, safety first. Remember, this is education, right? And I told you, would this have been true 2,000 years ago? Yeah, it would. And if I give examples that are current today, it's just because I want to kind of pique your interest with a current issue. But believe me, if we talked about it, I would be able to ground this in the past. And I may give you some references to that. So remember, with the Gottman Institute, we always seek to understand before we seek to fix. So the first thing we want to do is, what's going on with you, honey? What's happening? Why are you worried? I want to know what your concerns are, right? Okay, so that's what we're really going to look at. Okay, so I have a saying that I've used for about, I don't know, 30 years, and I really like it, and it's true, and I use it often, which is, when you don't think for yourself, other people will think for you. When you don't think for yourself, other people will think for you. And we've seen a lot of that happening recently. We just finished with the primaries, at least we have in Texas. And I noticed there was a lot of campaign ads going on for both sides, right? But, how do we think for ourselves? Because they're saying a lot of things they want you to think, but are we taking it to that next step and really understanding it? Now, for our purposes, we're not going to do that. For our purposes, what we're going to do is look at how some of this stuff might make us think and feel, and how that impacts our relationship with our very special person. So I want to step away from that a minute, and I want to talk about something about how that works. Okay. Science is really good at this. I mean, really good at this. And some of the best and brightest minds have gone in to learn this science to really target what their companies or businesses want to target, right? So these people are very good. They're very smart. They're very talented. They go to school for this. They learn in business. They learn how to target an audience and persuade them to buy a product, maybe vote for a candidate. But in general, statistically speaking, they're using scientific models to predict the future, right? So, for example, let's say you're a person who works at a company, and your job is to say to the company how many pairs of jeans to buy so that we can market them all over the United States and sell them. Well, what happens if the sales flop and you have a million leftover jeans, right? So your job in that capacity would be to predict the future. And they have ways, math, to decide exactly how many of those pairs of jeans they can buy. And then they have market analysis, whether to move them to different stores. But believe me, that's happening behind the scenes all the time for us, right? What we see is the marketing. We go in and say, ooh, a cool pair of jeans. But at the end of the day, why are we buying this and not buying that is something they think about a lot. Okay. But the point I'm making is these strategies are based usually, in these big companies especially, on solid science. Okay. The other thing too, and back to kind of my tag, some of these strategies are founded in assumptions that have been going on for thousands of years, thousands of years. I'm not going to bore you with the research, but believe me, some of this stuff goes clear back to Socrates. It goes clear back to markets 2,000 years ago and what you're buying in the marketplace. How to make your product marketable so that it sells. I'm sure anybody who's sold a house, you'll always hear location, 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 right? Well, that's something that people market. So we need to be mindful of how that impacts on our relationship. And that's the topic today, is the bond between us, right? right? Now, again, this is not to editorialize or attack how the world works. I'll fly over that. Um, but it's necessary that we look at how the world can impact our bonds. And back to the relationship house, what to leave in and what to leave out. Okay. Um, so, one of the things I want to do is slow down so that we can, look at what we're taking in inadvertently, right? When we walk around, we're very passive. I don't know this to be a fact, but somebody told me once that if you've never been into a store in particular and you walk in, people who are right-handed tend to lean to the right, so they may market things right to the right of the store. Say, so somebody's thought about that, right? Right. Okay. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is we hopefully, and I think overwhelmingly, do this for our children. At least I'm hoping you are, which is, what are they taking on? Who's trying to market to them? When they go upstairs and they're on their devices and we're not there, what's coming in for that? Well, that can shape how they think and feel, and that can also shape how the relationships go with their peers as well as us, right? So we do that for our kids all the time. I'm just suggesting we do it for our marriages and our special relationships. Okay. So very good. So let's see, what else do I got? I want to shift a little bit now. When you have an argument with your special person, even if it's a normal fight, right? At the end of it, do you seek to repair and become more close or closer than ever, right? Or do you walk away with kind of distance and hidden insecurities, right? That's an interesting thing, because if you're left more distance, where does your mind go, right? Now, just as a curiosity, and think of yourself, because everybody's different, right? But one thing I want to say is, how do you compensate for that loneliness? How do you compensate for it? How do you get those little dopamine hits that make you feel better, right? So if I have a rough day, do I come home and have a few extra bites of ice cream? Is that how I do it? How does that work for me? You see what I'm saying? Maybe I go out and I put it in exercise or something. I don't know. But how do we manage those feelings? How do we compensate for that loneliness? Okay. So the reason I say that is what's waiting for you, right, is your screen time, is your outside world time, which is loaded with little dopamine hits. I actually like commercials because, usually speaking, they can be entertaining, right? Just these little skits or these little fun things. But that's not why they're doing it. That might be why I'm watching it, because I'm entertained, right? When I was living in New York City, this is way back. Gosh, this is back in the 90s. I was doing my residency at Columbia. And one time there was a big billboard. And if I remember right, it was the Dove company, the Dove soap company. And they did a really cool thing. They put up a billboard, and the billboard was contained a lot of different women that were very attractive, but they were more like moms. Okay. They're more like moms, but they're very attractive women. And this had a nice ad about that. But what they didn't know is, right next to that ad, somebody put up a billboard for Victoria's Secrets and had supermodels. So what happened was, both of those were within eyesight of each other, right? Well, how did people see that? What did they think about it? What was occurring to them? What did they kind of take in as a result of that? Well, it depends on the person, right? Now, again, Dove and Victoria's Secrets was probably just trying to sell their product like they do, but it did kind of make an editorial, if you will. And how do we interject that is the kind of topic that I'm saying, because whatever you interject, I want you to be able to take it to your partner to increase the love and the bond between you both. Okay. Interesting stuff. But the point I'm making here is comparison. People like to compare. They like to compare for a lot of reasons, right? So what we want to look at is how we interject that comparison and what we do next, right? So when we feel inadequate or insecure, our minds can go to equalizing or compensating, right? So we buy more product, right? We feel insecure about that. Well, I better go out and buy something. I better go and do something that's going to help me feel like I'm better. For some people, boy, I've got to buy it to get an edge. I want to be really good in that sport, so I need that extra equipment to have an edge. Because why? Because if I'm not, what's my fear? What am I going to lose out? How am I going to lose out? right? So sometimes you buy things to feel good, right? Okay. You just want to do the right things for the right reasons, right? So my underlying need, my underlying worry, I need to take to my partner. And my partner needs to stop to seek to understand. Okay. So when we come back, I'm going to take some questions from the mailbag about this, but I hope I've piqued your interest. And I hope you notice that I'll bet you a nickel we all do this. So see you shortly.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Okay, well, hopefully I've piqued your interest on this topic, and let's keep going. So we had some good mailbag questions, and again, this is where I kind of skate a little close because I know some of the things that people ask me are kind of currently charged, and that's me by now. That's not my goal, but I think they're important sometimes for us to address insofar as how it affects your relationships. Okay, so first question from the mailbag: my partner always gets distant after work events or social gatherings. Okay. I always assume she's upset with me. Could something else be happening? All right. So this is a great example. And one of the reasons I picked it is a great example of, kind of what's going on internally. Right. So I'll talk to you all like I would be talking to him. What's going on with you internally? Okay. So, sometimes we start to compare, right? We start to say, well, why aren't they talking to me? Well, maybe I'm not interested. Well, maybe they'd rather talk to somebody else. Well, maybe they're busy with work and they don't care about me. I'm just making these things up. I don't know what this person's feeling. Okay. But we can start processing that comparison in the past and future channel rather than stay in the here and now. The other thing too is that, how do I feel when that happens? Well, I might feel embarrassed. I'm embarrassed because something's going on and maybe I feel some shame. Why are you feeling shame? It doesn't matter. You're feeling it, right? Or the other one is I feel insecure. I don't know what's going on, but I don't feel connected to my partner. So what you want to do with that is, and this is one of the things the Gottman Institute recommends, and that is a sentence. When this would be consistent with what we call gentle startup, which is, honey, when you come home from work and you're kind of quiet and distant, it kind of makes me feel insecure or worried because I don't know how come and I don't feel connected. What I need instead is for us to talk about it, and maybe you can let me know what's going on with you, or maybe reassure me that we're connected. Right? So that's a here and now question, isn't it? It's not I'm worried about all these things, right? It wasn't what we call the four horsemen. It wasn't a criticism, right? It wasn't like, well, I guess you're not going to talk to me because you're probably busy with something else. That would be a see what you're doing right? So we don't want to use those because we know 96% of the time it's going to go bad. So again, one of the things I would recommend is when this happens, I feel this. If you don't mind, if you could do this for me instead, I'd appreciate it. What do you think? All right. And again, I kind of go fast with these, but you can stop my show on reruns and replay it so that you have it. So that's why I do it that way. Mailbag question number 2. Okay. It seems like when I watch commercials or certain shows, the husband is seen as stupid or incompetent and tolerated by his family sometimes. It makes me short with my wife afterwards and we can start spatting. How can we avoid this trap? Well, this is a great example of maybe absorbing something off the media that gives us this worry or this thought monster, right? So I wonder how I'm seen. I'm wondering if everybody sees people like that, and I'm one of those people, and on and on. And we can just take this whole example and translate it across culture, across gender, but again, what you're noticing is people being aware that there's something going on that makes them insecure. What I'll hear many times from women, for example, is that they're in a high level position. Maybe I'll make this up. They're in a high level position at work, and how are they seen by the male community? Those things can be a real worry for people, right? So how do you manage that? Well, the first thing I want you to do is take any of your insecurities to your partner in a way that you can feel reassured. I'm just giving you generalities, but that's kind of what I mean. So one of the things you might do with this one is you could say, I'm going to use the same example. Honey, when we watch these shows, is it just me, or do you think the guy is really being seen as incompetent? And get their opinion. And if they say, well, yes, maybe, then you might say, well, boy, I tell you, do you see me that way? Because I would hate for that to kind of be an advertisement about how I am, because I don't think I'm that way. And I guess what I need is some reassurance that you really see me as competent and lovable. So these are ways that you can have the conversations with your partner. Now, part of what we're going to do in our 4th segment today is to have some fun with this over the week when you guys get together. So stay for that, because you're going to enjoy, I think, that exercise. It's kind of fun. I actually have been doing it for years, but I think you'll really, really like it. Okay. So here's one too. This is an interesting one. When I see quote unquote perfect women on TV, I know that they're using products like Botox, implants, facelifts, etc., but I worry they can distract my husband away from me, right? What can I do to feel more secure? Well, we're back to that. The world is full of people that we can compare to, but the reality of it is, and I really want to underscore this, with your partner, right? You are the most important person in the world, and you're perfect because there's only one of you and they can't get another one, right? So what you want to do is make sure you feel celebrated for that, and in kind, make sure your partner is celebrated for that. And you need to do it on a regular basis, because if you don't, people can drift and start to have more of these insecurities, right? But again, one of the things that can happen when we get worried about that is we might need to feel like we have to go out and spend money and have product and do kind of things that'll make us compete, if you will, with these people that we're imagining are a threat to us, right? And again, your partner needs to celebrate you and let you know you're awesome. Okay. So, it's funny. If I want to go the shame route, I could do it for you. I can sit there and say to you, look, I really need to apologize to you because I'm only 5'9" and my hair is not there anymore. And, I'm getting older. So, boy, I don't know what to say about that. I can always come up with things that society says maybe are less valued. But that's not why I think I'm valued by the people who love me. I think I'm valued because I'm me, right? And I want you to feel that way, because chances are it's true. And some of these thought monsters are getting in the way. But if you're really worried about it, take it to your partner. Now, again, remember safety first. But I do think what we do in our society a lot of times is dance around that. So couples start arguing about it rather than really go to the heart of their vulnerability and their insecurities with their partner. So keep that in mind, because, like I said, these are two really, worrisome kind of things. One about comparing ourselves to people who, might be really chosen because of their exceptional attractiveness. Or maybe, somebody's trying to make a comedy over some things that are funny that aren't funny to you and are very worrisome. So be careful with that, right? Go to your partner. Let's see. The last one I'll give you, let me check my time. Last one I give you, my boyfriend seems very focused on appearance lately, and it worries me. How should I approach that conversation? Well, one of the things that people do in society is we notice things. People are curious creatures. They like to look around, but sometimes people don't realize or recognize the impact that might have on people around them. Right? So that requires a conversation again in the here and now. So I'll use my my phrase again because I'm trying to teach it, and that is, hey, when I notice you seem to really pay attention to this person or that person, or you're really interested in this or that, it kind of makes me feel like you'd rather be with somebody like that than me. And I guess that makes me feel insecure. What I guess I need is reassurance that your focus is on me and not on somebody that you just saw in the Olympics that looks really attractive and very fit, right? So you want to be able to bring your vulnerabilities to your partner. That's intimacy, right? And your partner needs to pay full attention to that and to seek to understand it rather than fix it, right? Because you can fix that really quick. Oh, that's crazy. I'm not looking at that person. Don't worry about it. But that doesn't necessarily make the person feel reassured. What they might say is, what are some of the things that I can do to make you really feel loved and appreciated? Because it's there. I just want to make sure I'm doing more of it. Well, that's love maps, right? What does my partner need to feel celebrated? And we'll talk a little bit about that in our next segment, because what we're going to be doing is looking at really good tips that you can do that really make these things happen on a regular basis. One of the things I've talked about, I think, as a theme just about every show, is little things often. Little things often means that we do things in a way that reinforces that 20 minutes to 1 minute positivity in a relationship. When we have conflict, we make sure we still have 5 minutes of positivity to 1 minute of negativity, even in a conflict. And the other thing is we reassure our partner. This is why you're awesome. Ever notice with certain songs and stuff like that, they'll talk in love songs about how important somebody is to them. And we like to listen to them over and over again because it makes us feel secure, right? So, yes, that's, think of different songs that you can look at and see, and look for those, how much I love you kind of statements that are in those love songs. Country songs are really good at it. I remember as a kid, I always marveled at Neil Diamond's ability to put, great lyrics in music that suggest that they're great, right? So anyway, just to think about some of those things. I don't want to break into song. I wouldn't do that to you. But always remember, approach curiosity first. What's going on with you? Tell me more about that, those open-ended questions. Wow, what I hear you saying is this. That sounds like it really worries you. Am I right? And just go with staying on that. The other thing you can do is make sure that you stay with one person rather than go back and forth. Really kind of say that and then switch. After you feel more reassured and loved, you might say to your partner, well, is there any time you feel insecure? Well, anything I can do to help with that? Right. And just really get back to that, little things often. And I mean, really daily. Okay. So just some of that stuff. Like I said, when we come back, we're going to go to practical tips. And just again, I'm going to say, slow it down for people. Right. And the other thing too is stay away from the thought monsters. Stay away from those imagining past or future, especially if you've had a childhood or you've had relationships that were replete with disappointment. Don't want to bring those into the current relationship. So when we come back, we're going to talk about these practical tips I've been talking about. And I really enjoyed the mailbag today. I hope you did too. And we'll see you shortly.
Master of words, powerful player, What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
And we're back. All right. Well, we're going to go into this third segment. It's on practical tips and tools. But before we do, let me go ahead and put up my information. You know, one of the things I hope you enjoy are the mailbag questions. And one of the things that I particularly enjoy is getting feedback from you all, because I like to feel like it's our show in that way. And this way we can be interactive. And I personally, when I do these kind of shows, like to be more ad-libbed and spontaneous than structured and reading off of a teleprompter. I actually don't have a teleprompter. I could, but I don't because I like to just kind of go from what I'm thinking in the moment. So if you look at the information you have there, if you'd like to contact me and give me some information, I would be happy to read it. And if I really like it, I might use it on the air. You know, you might want to give me your name and what town you're from. I always appreciate that, but really do value that because that can be valuable for my show prep as well. So again, I don't leave it up a ton because you can always come back on a reviewing of my show and grab it at that time. So let's go to the actual third segment, relationship tools. I want to drill down a little bit more to what I just kind of mentioned in the mailbox section. Okay. And the first one is a practical tip is let your partner know what you're experiencing in the here and now, right? Don't add to it, you know, thoughts that you've had in the past that's really troubling you unless you want to just tag it. You know, what do you mean by tag, Don? Well, you know, like for example, hey, you know, I was really feeling insecure today when you came home late. And I guess, you know, when I was a kid, my dad would come home late and my mom and he would fight. And I don't know, I don't want to bring that in because that's not us. But one of the things I guess I wanted to notice is that maybe we could talk a little bit about, you know, reinforcing our security together or something like that. Okay. But you know, one of the things that you might notice for yourself, this is a practical tip too, is where do you go when? I mentioned that at the very beginning when we were talking about the intro questions. And, you know, do you tend to go to criticism or withdraw when you're worried about something, or you start to think about something that upset you, or you saw something on television that reminded you of something in your life and automatically you kind of run to your castle, so to speak? Slow down and look at that. Okay. And take a breath. What you want to be able to do is stay calm in the here and now and bring that event to your partner with how it makes you feel. Okay. So that's what I kind of mentioned earlier. You know, if you say I had a tough day and I'm feeling, you know, a little off or a little disconnected or off pitch or something like that, you can say, look, it's not about you, but what I really need right now is to talk about my day and get reassurance from you. get reassurance. And again, I know this sounds kind of silly, but you just need to remind me that you think I'm awesome. Just I really need that. So, what that does is it prevents misinterpretation. You're putting where you're at on the table. You're not talking in code, right? Remember in high school and junior high, people would play games. Hope that's not happening now. But, for an adult, what we want to do is to make sure that we talk about what we do feel, not what we don't feel. And we talk about what we need, not what we don't need. We need to be clear to our partner so they know what they need to tend to with us. Okay. So part of what I want to say with that is turn towards the vulnerability, right? And again, this is not necessarily something we're taught or trained with. Secure relationships do it all the time. But, one of the things that we're going to feel in our lifetimes is vulnerable. And like I said, vulnerability kind of makes us more susceptible to some of those things I was talking about earlier on television and on TV shows, et cetera. Okay. So secure couples respond to each other with curiosity. Gee, tell me more about that. That's interesting. But I'm here for you. I care. Talk to me more. Those are statements to say, look, I'm solid. What's going on with you? Okay. And just really staying with that. Okay. So part of what can happen with that is if you come in and say, I'm feeling kind of vulnerable. I had an off day today and I really just need to talk to you. A nice thing to come back to if somebody says that to you is absolutely tell me what happened today. I want to be here for you. Right. Then as you do that, hold your own feelings. Don't go to what you have. Well, what does that mean, Don? You had a bad day. Let me tell you about my bad day. Hold on that. You guys can take turns about your bad days, but this person started first. So again, absolutely. Tell me what happened today. I want to be here for you. Okay. So you want to stay with that. Then what you want to do is ask open questions. Tell me more about that situation. What did you notice? What did you think was happening? Right? Well, when you thought that was happening, how did you experience your own internal feelings? Get them talking about things in a way that two things happen. They use you as a sounding board, and B, you're conveying to them you really want to hear it. Okay. So that those open-ended questions really can make, the person talk more deeply, right? And you're keeping that on that person. The message to that person is this really does matter to my partner. This is really something that they care about. And they care about that because they care about me. Right. Right. So very, very, very important. So it's very, very necessary to not fix. Partners, a lot of times when they come to you, they don't look for the answer to the riddle. They just want to tell you about their experience and why it's important to them. And good friends and partners really listen and stay with that. Okay. So what you're doing is you're listening because you're curious and you're listening because you're wanting to understand. Right. And you're honing in not just with the words, but where their vulnerabilities are. Why does that scare them? Where is that coming from? Okay. So very important. The other thing too is people can be different, right? Women and men can be socialized differently. Women and men may have their own styles of talking about problems. Women and men sometimes also have this idea of how to talk. So, sometimes people talk in very short sentences and words, and some people like to use paragraphs. Nothing's wrong with either of them. Try to draw people out. That's the key. What's going on with them. Try to use feeling words. Sometimes people don't like to use feeling words. And remember, not just happy, sad, glad, mad, but bigger words like disappointment and worried and confused and vulnerable and sometimes people feel alone or they feel abandoned. Those words are okay too. You might have to draw it out of some folks, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. It's just they might be socialized not to use them, but they can help, because then when you comfort, those feelings are in the room and people can feel more safe and connected with you. Okay, something to keep in mind. Next, tool number 3, keep the relationship bond between you two, keep the bond away from comparison. right? The comparisons are those lonely feelings when we feel like we're going to get voted off the island, right? Those are these things. Well, I have to watch other people because if I don't, people are going to shun or reject me. And maybe I've been shunned or rejected in my life, which is pretty much everybody. And what does that mean to you now, right? So the question I have for you, it kind of sounds like the first segment, but are we comparing our life to an illusion that someone or something else has shown us? Well, now that gets us back to commercials and stuff like that, because people have a product just waiting for you that's going to solve everything, right? So just slow it down, right? The other thing I want to say about that is back to the tail wagging the dog. I mean, we might want to buy something we really like because we really like it. And I'm not knocking that, but I just want to make sure the tail isn't wagging the dog. Are we buying something to somehow settle us down for 3 minutes and then the feeling comes back and that thing we bought didn't help a bit and now we've got a thing, right? So be careful, know while we're doing things. Watch impulse buying for those reasons, right? So what do we already have ourselves, right? That comparison is making us ignore our wonderfulness, right? So, what is that? Like I said, I'm 5'9", which by the way was absolute average when I was in high school. But now I'm probably shorter because I'm happy to say with nutrition and everything else in the world, people are growing. Our kids are growing bigger than us, which I really think is cool. I don't mind that at all. But somebody might say, well, you're only 5'9". There's nothing wrong with being 5'9", folks, right? But if somebody really lets that bother them and absorbs that, well, now what are we going to have to do? Well, that's comparison, right? That's comparison. Don't want to do that. What I want to know is how do my people who love me make me feel special and connected and loving? And that's where I want to be, right? That's where I want to be. And I want to be in the here and now. So if somebody disapproves of me for whatever reason, well, they're entitled to their opinion, right? But it's not going to affect how I see myself. That's secure attachment, right? That's where, people can say, hey, I'm good enough. Doesn't matter what I am. The fact is I'm me. And I want you all to feel that way, but I want you to take that to your person, right? And if you're in those early relationship dating things, you want to look to make sure people kind of get this and see it. This is one of the things you look for. We had a show a couple episodes before about dating and how to go from infatuation to commitment. That's one of the things you look for in commitment. Do people like me for me or do they like me because fill in the blank, right? Because fill in the blank can change. That's part of the problem with fill in the blank. So very important to keep that in mind. You want somebody who's going to love you for the duration just because you're you and can't get another you. Okay. So what are we looking at that we're comparing about? And as a result, we're ignoring what's really great about us, right? Because insecurity wants to get you to stay insecure so you compensate for it. That's love is a pie, not a blanket. I'll get back to that later. One of the jokes I've had before as I've talked to people is, how people will say, wow, that person's a 10. Whoa, that person's this, that person's that. My joke is I'm a 2. Okay. I'm too short. I'm too tall. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too dumb. I'm too smart. You get the idea, right? So the point is it doesn't matter. What matters is the people who love me and care for me love me unconditionally. And for people who have to love me because of the other reasons, I can be friends with them, but probably not at the same level that I would like with my truly special friends, right? So yeah, I've always laughed about that. But people do like to compare. They like to assign things. I always watch that. If I'm watching a sports show, one of the things I think is really interesting is these shows will talk about who's the best quarterback ever, who's the best this ever, who's the best ever. It's always comparison. And I think people can do that, but don't do it in your relationship. So anyway, we're going to come back to the fourth segment. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about our fun assignment this week. I think you're really going to like this one too. So we'll go to commercial. We'll see you in a second, and then we'll get to that fourth segment.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
All right. Well, I have a lot to say in this segment. I do want to do one more from segment 3, and that is tool number 4, which is reinforce the bonds with little things often. Okay. So one of the things you want to do is constantly remind your person that they are amazing just because they're who they are. So healthy couples regularly say things like, I appreciate you for this. I respect how you handled that. I'm glad we're going through life together. I think you're awesome. I can't imagine life without you. Tell your partner you love them for no reason at all, and do it often. So when you have these conversations, you can always kind of end with that kind of statement, right? You love them because they are perfect just because they're them. You can't get another one of them. And it doesn't matter, if their hair starts to turn silver, it doesn't matter if they can't run as fast as they used to run. It doesn't matter. What matters is they're them, right? And people do have that. I mean, like for examples, people can be in their 50s and they get downsized or laid off, and their identity was really into their career. And they come home to their partner saying, you know what, it doesn't matter because we're together and you're awesome. And I didn't love you because you had that great job. I loved you because you're who you are. Goes a long way, folks. And believe me, when you go through the whole lifespan, you're going to have your ups and downs. So just be real careful with that. Secure attachment means that you love your person just because of who they are, right? They don't have to compensate. Remember, love is a blanket, not a pie. If I think love is a pie, I always have to get my conditional love today. But if love is a blanket, it's like you're all sitting on the couch and warming each other together. And that's where you don't have to worry about being warm because you're just warmed by the love of everybody under the blanket together. Try to get to that and make sure people know it and you appreciate them. So our fun exercise, remember, safety first. One of the things I want to do is I want to remember that theme is if you don't think for yourself, other people will think for you. So I want you to take your person and I want you to do something like watch commercials or do something like, as you're driving in the car and you see something that's trying to persuade you in a certain way. Notice it out loud and then talk about how you both see it. You might see it different, right? So I just think it's really kind of fun to do that. One of the ones I don't want to pick on anybody for commercials because they work really hard about this. But, one of the things I've heard for a long time, maybe even decades, is on commercials, I'll hear you deserve, and then fill in the blank, right? The question I have is exactly why do I deserve that? And if I didn't pay for it, would I still deserve to have it? you know, so it's a little thing, but I want you to just question it, right? And maybe you do feel you deserve something today. Maybe that's really good. But what I'm saying is watch what's coming at you. Watch how they're trying to persuade you and whether they're targeting you. There's a lot of commercials on television that don't target me and I don't pay attention to them. But when I start paying attention to them, I'm thinking I bet they're targeting me. So I want to know how they're doing it. What's going on with that. And you can notice a number of different things. So I want you guys to just do that. I want you to play that game this week. Whenever you have an opportunity, you can stop and look at that. Remember that one guy in the mailbag that says, hey, every time I watch a commercial, it seems like the guy's a dummy. Say it out loud and look at that. And maybe the other one will say, hey, this commercial, it makes me feel like if I don't buy that, I'm not going to be good enough. Talk about those things. Go back to intimacy, go back to connection, and then reinforce to your partner how awesome you think they are. So I have a little bit of time left. One of the things that I want you to do is do that. But I did have some fun with this with AI. And what I did was I looked up some of the history of commercials just for fun. And one of the things that I really liked about this is in the 20s, there was a guy by the name of, if I can say it right, Edward Bernays. And I think he was the cousin of Freud. But in the 20s, Americans often ate breakfast very light. They would have a little breakfast before they went to work. So this guy, Bernays, asked doctors if a hearty breakfast was healthier than a light one, and thousands of doctors agreed. So they endorsed this nationwide campaign, and suddenly bacon and eggs were the traditional American breakfast. Isn't that cool? Now, again, I didn't fact check this. I didn't chase footnotes, but I do want to say I think that's fascinating because to this day, people might like a hearty breakfast and, with bacon and eggs and all the trimmings. I know when I was a kid, it was kind of one of the things I enjoyed on Sundays with my family. Okay. So here's another one. Lucky Strikes. I think it was the same guy. Talked about cigarettes for women being torches of freedom. In 1929, women smoking in public was still socially taboo. So a public campaign encouraged women to smoke as a symbol of their independence and freedom. During the New York parade, women lit cigarettes called these torches of freedom, and smoking became tied to modern identity rather than just cigarettes and a habit. Isn't that fascinating? Again, I didn't fact check this, but if it's true, that's fascinating to me, right? So marketing often connects a product not just with doing it, but your identity. To that end. Let me look at my time. So they wanted to make green fashionable for women because of the Lucky Strike green ball on the menthol cigarettes, right? So what they did was they really started making sure that high society people wore green to go with the outfits that women were wearing, right? So that was something that was really started happening. So it started influencing fashion designers, department stores, magazines, and interior designers to go and follow suit, right? Did it work? Right? Because that's the other thing. You try advertising and then you got to figure it out. I guess apparently it did short time. Short time, the green did become fashionable, but what happened is the war broke out. So what happened with that is they did eventually change the pack of green Lucky Strikes to white, and the campaign was called Lucky Strike Green Has Gone to War. So they tied that whole thing to a different idea or campaign. All I'm asking you all to do when you watch fun commercials this week or shows, look for it. Look for what they're trying to do and who they're targeting. It's a blast. And then the other thing is, does that make you feel insecure? Does that make you feel vulnerable? Right? So again, if you're starting to compare and need to buy because you're comparing, go to your partner and build the bond instead. I am Dr. Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. I'm on 1 o'clock Eastern time each week on Wednesday. We will see you next week.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.